Hi, I'm Leanna Chamish,
I'm Brian St. August.
and welcome to another episode of the Actor's Hot Tub. And what are we discussing today, Brian?
I thought it would be fun to talk about audition behavior.
Oh, yes, that is so important, how you present yourself in an audition, what you do there. So, let's jump into that. How about when you show up? When should you show up for an audition?
Well, it's funny. I think in our business, promptness is so very important. You're never late for a shoot. You're never late for being on set. And I always take it the same way. I'm never late for an audition. However, that doesn't mean that when you arrive early, you necessarily should go into the audition. You want to talk a little bit more about that, Leanna?
Yeah, like you said, we always plan ahead. I think you and I show up excessively early. We'll drive there hours ahead of time and have a coffee or something because it's a cardinal sin to be late. But if you go in 15 minutes early, that's generally considered to be on time for your audition. If you go in earlier than that, you run the risk of annoying the casting director by being there before your time. You could throw them off in terms of who they wanted to pair you with, or I guess just make them uncomfortable because you're there before they expect.
Yeah, because I think a lot of casting
Yeah.
directors are setting up for their shoot just the way that we would have to set up to do a shoot. So they're making this arrangement for the camera, this arrangement for talent, sign-in logs, and you name it. So they don't need somebody just wandering in an hour before they're expected to get in their way. At the same time, I think it's really important for me. I'll speak just for me on this. I like to get to the location I'm going to be visiting early. So number one, I know I'm there. I'm not, my risk of getting lost is behind me. And I have a chance to relax. I'll get a coffee in the neighborhood. I'll go over my sides or whatever I'm going to be preparing for. But I'm just chilling before I actually go in. That's really important to me. Do you have a similar need?
I absolutely do. I'm always concerned about parking. I don't know if there's a garage or a lot or what the situation is.
True.
I like to make sure that if I get there and there's not a parking spot, if I'm there early enough, maybe I can circle and find on-street parking or figure out what the situation is and take care of that in a relaxed way without rushing or having to park in an unsafe place and have an excessively long walk. Or also it gives me a chance to scope out the location and make sure I'm comfortable even going there.
Yeah, that's a good point because there are some locations you might not be so comfortable with.
I've turned away from locations that just didn't look quite right.
But let's assume that,
Yeah.
that this particular audition that we're talking about now is one, it's a very reputable company. We've been there before. And so you've arrived, but you haven't gone in. Leanna had suggested going in about maybe 15 minutes
Right.
early.
You said sometimes you go in 20. I think that's just about the right range to go in.
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes early is fine. And what often will happen is the casting director might even say, hey, listen, Leanna, since you're here early, the client's not here yet, maybe we could go through a couple of reads with you. That's always nice. It's also rare, but it does happen sometimes.
That is nice when it happens. So also you don't want to be there so early that you're in their way if they plan to have a meeting and discuss private things among their staff. But yes, once in a while it does work out for you where you get the opportunity to read against more actors because you're there early. But also because you're there early, if they say they can take you early, don't let them rush you into your audition. If you were counting on that time to read your lines and get a little more centered or familiar with the material, especially if it's a cold read, say, I really do need the extra 15 minutes. Can I just go at the time I was scheduled for? So that's something to consider as well.
And what you can do, if you get there early, you could choose not to sign in. That way, when somebody comes out looking for the actors that are available, your name's not in the book for them to read off anyway until you choose to put it in. And that might be a way to deal with what you were
That is good.
just talking
That is
about.
very good advice. And you bring up the point of signing in. We may be speaking to people who haven't auditioned before. This is generally how it goes. You show up and there's a sheet and you sign your name and usually your email address, and you check off a few other boxes, like if you're willing to work for it as an extra, if you don't happen to book a principal in whatever you're going for, and then you take a seat in a waiting area, which leads to a whole nother series of questions about etiquette and behavior. You want to talk about what to do in the waiting room?
Well, the first thing that I do when I get there is to put my cell phone on airplane mode so that my phone doesn't ring. The waiting room in a casting area is one of those kind of rooms, almost like a church, where people do talk, but they tend to whisper because people are thinking about their sides, they're going through a lot of mental gymnastics. And also, maybe right next to that waiting room is the room where the actual castings are taking place. So there might be somebody in the room already, and any talking or any phone ringing that would happen could be conveyed into that room. We want to try to avoid that kind of a situation.
Right, and sometimes you have chatty people that want to talk to you, and there are different things that could be going on in that situation. Sometimes they may be trying to intimidate you or distract you so that they have an edge. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes they just are being chatty. So it depends on your mood. Are you ready to go in your audition and you want to chat, or you don't? Let's say that you don't. Then how do you get out of that situation where someone's talking your ear off, but you want to be looking at the lines you picked up next to the sign-in sheet, or look at the storyboards that are posted on the wall to get ready? What do you do when someone's trying to talk your ear off and you want to get away and learn your lines?
Well, I might say something like, Harry, it was so good to meet you. I really wish you the very best. But you know what? I need to kind of spend a couple of minutes by myself here. So please don't think I'm rude. But I want to go over the sides quietly for a minute. But it's great to meet you.
Oh, that's a good way to handle it. Sometimes I'll just pick up my sides and I'll just wander over to a wall where I'll pick a spot on the wall, make eye contact like it's the camera, and I'll start doing my lines. I don't think I'm rude to anybody when I wander away. It's like, oh, I got to work on my lines. And then I just go and kind of look at the wall or out a window. Or sometimes if it's a very crowded audition and you know you're not going to be seen for a few minutes, if there's a door to the outside, you can go stand outside for a few moments. I've done that too.
Yeah. What do you do in the occasion that you mentioned before about somebody who might try to intimidate you?
I just try not to let it get to me, but you know what? It does get to me. I have to admit, because I walk into a room full of people that look very similar to me in many cases, because we're going for the same part, which is the same age range or the same hair color and build, and I start to get demoralized. But it's like, oh, look at all these pretty ladies, and they all look so talented and prepared. So I really don't have good advice except to know that maybe that's what's going on with people, and just to have confidence in yourself that, as we've discussed before, if you're right for the part, you're going to get it. If you're not, you're not. There's nothing that those other people can do to you that will change your chances at the job. To just give it your very, very, very best.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we try to use that time in the waiting room to get ourselves calm and poised and refreshed around the sides. I was mentioning to Leanna earlier, before we started this shoot, that in New York I've found that it's really rare to get sides for a commercial audition until you actually arrive at the audition. I don't know if that's something they do to see just how quickly you are to spontaneously relate to what they give you, or that they just want all of their people that they're casting to have the same amount of time to prepare for the read. Whatever it is, that is something unique. If it's a legit situation or an episodic you're reading for, you'll often get those sides in the mail prior, but for commercial, you kind of walk into it. So it really is important when you're coming to that audition to be able to give yourself a little bit of time to relax and get familiar with those sides, because you're seeing them for the first time. And you want to be able to interpret that, have in your mind a couple of ways you might want to present them.
Absolutely. And another waiting room thing I would caution you about is be careful what you talk about with other people. The casting directors could be overhearing you. Just for your reputation in the business, don't badmouth anybody or just show any negative behaviors, because I think it's often said, and it's true, that your audition begins the moment you walk into the building where they may observe you, the casting people and so forth. They're forming an opinion of your personality, how easy you are to work with, whether you're a difficult person or a snob or a diva or so be good in the waiting room.
And a special message to those people who do try to intimidate you by sharing with you and the other people in the room the national commercial they just shot with Metropolitan, or what other major acting successes they've had recently. Always remember, particularly in a commercial audition, a lot of clients want to see fresh faces, and they aren't really necessarily looking forward to seeing somebody that they've just watched on an insurance commercial the day before. So you can be shutting down your own possibilities by declaring that up front.
Right. All right, so we've gone past waiting room behaviors. Now, the next step is your name gets called. It's your turn. Let's see, that could go a number of ways. Sometimes you get called to another area where there's a shorter line. Has that ever happened to you?
No.
You just sit on, okay. Anyway, but then you have to go into the room when they're ready for you. What do you do when you walk into the room where there's a camera, maybe a client, and the casting director? What happens in there?
Well, they'll typically ask you to slate your name. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, maybe even before that. Should you shake hands? When do you hand over a headshot? If you're handing over a headshot, that type of thing.
Well, typically when you walk in the room, there either will be somebody who will take your headshots and will give you a sense of what they're going to be doing in there, or what I'm finding more often is that the person that is running that casting is going to be in the room by themselves. They will typically not need your headshot because nowadays so much of that is done electronically that they already have your professional shot. What they're going to want to do is do a digital shot of you, just as we're shooting now. Mm-hmm. They will shoot a picture of you at that time. But they'll explain what the commercial is about, what the client wants to see, how many kinds of reads they want you to do, give you a little bit of a preliminary. And then they're going to ask you to slate. What is that all about?
Well, they will probably tell you what they want, but usually a slate involves stating your name, and sometimes they'll say we're going to get a full body shot too. So I've had them tilt the camera up and down to take a look at me. So I say, "Hi, I'm Leanna Chamish," and then I kind of put my arms out so they can see my physique, and they take a look at that, and then
cheer. They cheer then.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I cheer.
Sometimes they stop the camera between the slate and when you do the audition. It depends on the person. They may tell you to slate and then go into your audition, or they may say to slate and then they stop, and then later they'll restart the camera and give you a cue for the audition portion.
And many times, for people like me rather than Leanna, they'll ask me if I would be willing to shave. Before, if I get the opportunity, well, I'd be willing to shave for it.
Yeah, I don't get that question much.
No, I wouldn't think that you would, but there might be somebody who might. But in any regard, that's not a really simple question, because if you're booked on other projects that are shooting within a relatively short time, your response to that might be, I probably couldn't, right, because I'm in a project another week that requires my mustache. They cast me that way, and so unfortunately, I hope you can use me as I am. But at least that's a response. If in fact you can cut it off, great. Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to shave for that.
Yep. So we covered walking into the room. A general rule of thumb is don't shake the casting director's hand unless they extend their hand first. You don't want to go up to a table full of people, if there's a table full of people, and start glad handing them unless they extend a hand to you. But it is, in my experience, more what Brian is saying. It's usually just one person behind a camera. And they do want you to state your name, what you're auditioning for, and then you go into the audition portion where you do your very best. follow their direction, whether or not you're supposed to be making eye contact with the camera, or if you're supposed to be looking off to the side as though it's a character or an interview type of situation that you're portraying in the audition. Follow their lead. After that, that's all you need to do for that part.
And then I like to thank them very much for giving me the time and the consideration. And one thing that I try to do, and it's something that I suggest you might want to think about, when I get ready to leave the audition area and leave the waiting room, I just turn and thank everybody and wish them the best in the audition, because we pay it forward that way. There are always going to be enough roles for everybody. We don't have to get everyone, and we may not get that one, but we can always wish other people the best in their attempt.
And I always wish the casting director and anybody else who's there with the staff good luck on the project, and I hope you find who you're looking for. I know it may not necessarily be me, and that's fine. I've had a chance to go in there and show off and have a good time and stay on their radar, which is really important.
That's right. And I await your call tomorrow.
Actually, you anticipated my next question, because when I first started out in the business, I would follow up with emails the next day. When will I find out? I know it's not important. I don't ask anymore. You wait, right?
You wait. That's right.
Yeah, and if you don't hear from them, well, you got your answer.
I think that I had mentioned it on one of our earlier videos that when I leave an audition, the first thing that I do when I get in the car is I think about it, how I did. I compliment myself on having gone there in the first place, because it takes a lot just to get there. And then after I've done that and kind of gotten my hands around it, I just forget it. Put on some music, go home, and I try to forget about the audition entirely, because at that point it's out of our control. Totally out of our hands.
Yep. Well, I think we've covered it from when you show up, what you do when you walk into the waiting room, what you do when you get in with the casting director and or the client, and leaving. Is there anything you think we've left out?
I don't think so, but if you think so, please drop us a note and let us know so we can add it to our thoughts.
That's right, and we can discuss it in a future episode of The Actor's Hot Tub. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon.
Be well.
Bye.